Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the M. Keith Weikel Leadership Speaker Series. My name is Blair Sanford. I'm Assistant Dean for the full-time MBA and Master's programs. And together with my colleagues, Jean Sink and Gabe Skiff, we work together to collaborate on delivering the series. A special welcome to our virtual audience this evening who submitted questions in advance. And for those of you in the live audience, you'll have an opportunity to consider questions about halfway through the program, and there's microphones on either side of the room. You can queue up. And because we'd love to take a lot of questions this evening, please limit yourself to one apiece. Believe me, we've had some people who've wanted to stand there for a bit. And
one question.
yeah. I'd like to also welcome our other guests from TIAA from around different offices in the country. Welcome. Thank you for being with us. And also to our Dean, Vallabh Samba Murthy, our Alberto Nicholas Dean, who will be in conversation with Thasunda this evening. So glad that you could be here with us to share this special time. And now I'm delighted to have the opportunity to welcome Thasunda Brown Duckett, President and CEO of TIAA. Previously, she was CEO of Chase Consumer Banking.
A happy customer.
Yeah. He already asked for tips.
And Thasunda has been recognized widely as a leading executive in the financial services industry. She was named by Fortune as one of the most powerful women to watch. She was named as the most powerful woman in banking by American Banker magazine. She founded the Rosie and Otis Brown Foundation in honor of her parents to recognize people who use ordinary means to empower and uplift their community in extraordinary ways. I found it interesting that she was one of 16 women who inspired LeBron James's first shoe for women. And yeah. Managed to find her way onto the Nike board. So I like that part too.
I do too.
Yeah. So I think we're in for a real treat this evening. And I really am pleased that you're here to hear that. And let's go along for the ride. Dean Samba, please take it away.
Thank you, Blair, and good evening, everyone. Thasunda, I must say that I'm both a Chase customer and I've entrusted TIAA with my life savings.
Oh, yeah.
So you had a very successful 15+ year career with Chase, JP Morgan Chase, including being the CEO of this great company for 4.5 years. What motivated you to make the transition to TIAA, which I'm happy you did, but why did you move?
Well, first, it's such a pleasure to be here, and I do want to acknowledge my TIAA colleagues. Thank you for your leadership and everything that you all do to ensure that our participants have the confidence to have lifetime income, particularly at the time they need it most. And it's a pleasure to be here with all these MBA students. I love it. So in terms of what led me to leave an amazing company, JP Morgan Chase, with a phenomenal, iconic leader, Jamie Dimon, to be able to come and have the privilege to be the CEO of TIAA. Well, I will just point to a couple of things. First, my father, Otis Brown, always taught me to reach for the moon because even if I missed, I would be among the stars. And so I think that's just such a amazing statement that my father provided at such a young age, because that statement has no limit, it has no gender, it has no color, it has no bias, just reaching for the moon. I say that because sometimes when you are asked a question about what led you to do something, many times it goes back to the foundation of who you are and how you were raised and what are some of the things that people along the way taught you. Working at JP Morgan Chase, I had the opportunity, I think, to be around some of the most iconic and thoughtful leaders And so I was well trained. I had the opportunity and privilege to be a CEO in one of the most difficult times when you are the CEO of the consumer bank, navigating 40,000, 50,000 people to work every day during a pandemic,
Right.
during the peak of social justice and the reckoning in our country. You had to get up and make decisions that no one had a playbook for, while at the same time being a mother, a son who in the middle of working came to me in my office at home and said, "Mommy, why do white people think they're smarter than us?"
Yeah.
While you're navigating a pandemic and social justice, you had to pause to tend to a 13-year-old
Right.
son whose heart was heavy. During that time period, though, you hit your bottom. And I learned that it was okay to not be okay. I say that story because when you hit that bottom, everything is stripped. And you also evaluate yourself. What I realized is that I wanted to do even more. So when the recruiter called and told me about this amazing opportunity, you take your shot. I could have talked myself out of it. I love JP Morgan Chase. I was named on the operating committee as CEO, breaking history, but you take your shot. And the more that I learned about this amazing company, about Carnegie over 100 years ago, who saw that educators who were educating the most brilliant minds hiring in poverty, how this company was. My mother is an educator. My father worked in a warehouse. The daughter, after I graduated from college, had to tell the father that looking at his retirement statement, he could not retire because he didn't take advantage of the benefits he was entitled to. Not because he didn't want to, because no one ever told him in a way that he could receive it, because after all, he was just processing files. I tell you all of that when you ask the question quite simply. There was preparation that met opportunity. Being open to listen. The more I listened, the more I fell in love. At TIAA, I get to further accelerate my purpose, which is to inspire and make impact. I get to think about Rosie and Otis Brown every day. I get to be surrounded with individuals that are passionate about who we are. And I was able to break a few ceilings along the way by being the first woman CEO at TIAA. Being the first time in our country's history that an African-American male, Roger Ferguson, one of the most brilliant minds of our day, was going to have another Black CEO take the reins. Has never happened in the history. Most importantly, make impact. That's why I chose TIAA.
Wonderful. So I like that you use the Hamilton reference of it. Just don't throw away a shot.
That's
So
right.
that's great.
I know. I love Hamilton. I love all the songs.
Right.
Okay.
I love. That makes it two of us.
Okay.
My girls beg me not to sing.
Oh.
So,
No judgment, right? We can get Team Salmon out of tune.
I learned you get much more appreciation in the workplace than you do at home.
That's true. That's true.
So, talking about your experiences, what lessons can you share about navigating your way through what must have been a challenging and often unwelcoming terrain in your rise to the top?
Yeah, so I'll give you some what I call gems, and hopefully they'll resonate. Some I shared earlier with the students who are like representing, giving me comfort. You know, y'all are like sitting in the front row, like, we got you, we got you. I appreciate it. Thank you. But here's some tips that I would share with all of you. One, intellectual curiosity matters. You can't out Google.
Yeah.
You can be curious. I think, you know, I'm always one to ask the second and third question. Why is this? And how did you do that? Well, what if you did this? And I think intellectual curiosity is the key in corporate America or in entrepreneurship or whatever you all aspire. So that is something I would say, be curious. Be curious about what's not your given. Be curious about something that you know nothing about so you can get proximate. And I think the more you can get proximate to things that may not be your given, the more that you can be a better leader and a better contributor in corporate America. So, you know, I'm not that proximate with compliance, but I am curious. And so even though that's not something I get excited about every day, I try to lean into risk, compliance, audit, legal, because I know my given bent is more into strategy and execution and you know, the frontline business. But that makes me a stronger leader because I can think end to end and I can think about what are the issues. And no matter how awesome these ideas are, you don't have a strong chassis, problems can occur. So be intellectually curious. Secondly, I would say, be okay taking your shot. Sometimes the mental gymnastics in our head would cause us to not take our shot. Anybody have mental gymnastics in your head, or is it just me? Okay. What I mean by that is that sometimes when there is an opportunity, you will tell yourself all the reasons why not, and you don't ever tell yourself, what if? What if I actually like it? What if I can learn something that I didn't know? So get the mental gymnastics out of your head, be intellectually curious. Authenticity, it's almost like a word that everybody is using, like diversity, that starts to get watered down. Like, you are not authentic, mister. You know, that he will be up there saying he's so authentic. You're like, no, you're not. But it's a buzzword. But what I like to say is when you think about your authenticity, that's where your magic lies. And I talked about this before when I think about where you really give outside value to an organization. You are hired for your technical competency. That's a given. If we're in a meeting, I bring risk, marketing, product, legal, audit, all the functions. I expect that you will understand your technical competency in terms of the issue and bring that perspective and insight from a technical view. But that's with everyone. How many of you all are finance majors? How many of you all are marketing? How many of you all are data scientists? How many? I mean, there's more than one. There's only one you. Perspective, where your differentiation lies. So it is so important that when you are in a meeting, yes, you bring your technical, you know, competency, but the differentiation is when you bring your unique perspective, is why you want different people at the table, not just the diversity of thought, but the diversity of perspective. Because perspective, as a Black woman, a perspective as someone who grew up in Texas, as a perspective of a daughter, a mother, a sister, a friend, as a perspective of someone who is first generation full integration, a perspective of someone whose father did not go to college, a perspective. I see issues on what is a business matter. I bring my unique perspective to my technical competency, and that cannot be replicated. If you bring your perspective to the conversation, I can't transfer that by hiring you from Goldman because you're here. But bring it, because if you don't, it's a free option because I can get your technical competency somewhere else. And then lastly, I would say empathy is a word that I'm saying a lot more in corporate America and in these conversations. I do believe empathy in leadership matters. I think in the past, we would talk about the IQ and, you know, all that makes great leaders, and empathy is soft, but it's human capital. And I think if we didn't learn anything, we learned through the pandemic, mental health is real. We learned that people are heavy. By being a CEO with no empathy, navigating a pandemic, I don't care how brilliant you are. So all that to say, your authenticity, bring your unique perspective to the table. Intellectually, be curious. Bring empathy and bring you. I think if you do all those things, I think you have a real shot to make a real difference. There's a long other list.
That's very insightful. Something you said made me think about it. So many of one of the joys of being in an academic institution is you see the younger and younger generations come, bring their passion.
You
And
keep saying younger and younger. How old am I now?
yeah, you're still
I'm like younger.
right.
Oh,
So here is the thing. When I started teaching, they used to get my references. Now they no longer do, and I have to look for new jokes and new materials. But our current students bring a lot of passion about the environment.
yes.
They bring a lot of passion about the planet. They bring a lot of passion about people, right? Society. So the question is, from your vantage point of view, how have CEO conversations changed about the purpose of a corporation?
Oh, wow. First, let me just say, because I'm older, things get complicated the older you get. You know, things are not so black and white. I say that because what's beautiful about the young people is there's a purist in their mindset.
Yeah.
And that's beautiful because that's how change occurs. It occurs from, I don't care about all these other things. You know, I want this to happen. And so there's beauty. The future is always in the youth. Disruption is always through the youth. Because the older you get and the more experiences you have, you realize things are complicated and that two things can be true. That's something that I think we have to also bring in this generation in particular because of data and because of the way these algorithms, it just continues to feed your own beliefs and thoughts. And that's great for marketers, but it's not so good when you think about the art of compromise and that, you know, two things can be true and you lose that curiosity because you're fed your view is the only view. When you think about what has changed though in corporate America a lot, I think, and you all have seen this if you look at a lot of companies and if you look at their report, you will notice a shift.
Right.
If you pull any company and see what did their annual report say 10 years ago or 20 years ago or 30 years ago, 40 years ago, and what does it say today? You will hear more about corporations' responsibility to community. You will hear more about it's not just about delivering shareholder returns. You will hear things about making decisions that are good for the environment or structural and systemic racism has to change. And you're hearing this from CEOs. And I think that the reality is that corporations can no longer divorce themselves from the issues of society. And the fact is that many times corporations can play a very important role towards forward progress. And so I think that what you see more is that companies cannot be insular in who they serve and how they serve and not think about the community around them. And they have to use their voice more and more. I think it's also important around recruiting talent. Because as you said, Sam, if this is what's important to all of you, and you all want to know, what does TIAA really stand for? You want to know who are the people at the company? What are they doing with the environment? Are they serious about diversity, equity, and inclusion? What are their practices and what are their results? Not what they say, but let me see what they do. And that is a real shift where a soundbite is no longer sufficient. So I think you've seen a real shift in corporate America being tapped to use their voice more than maybe sometimes what they would like, because it is complicated. You know, the world is not black and white, and you serve many different people that have many different views. And so how do you decide what you're going to stand for when even the employees that you represent are not monolithic in their thinking? And so it's very difficult for corporations to just say, no comment, we do this as a business. But that is what's required going forward. And I don't see that going away anytime soon. And by the way, I think society is better for it as a result of corporations having leadership courage on really tough issues to really be.
That's fascinating because I think we're observing that CEOs are often stepping up into more visible and articulate leadership positions.
Yeah, employees are demanding it.
Absolutely.
You know, employees want to know what is your stance and in Afghanistan? What are you doing
Yeah.
with George Floyd? What about GLBTQ? What about voting rights? They're asking the questions and they're holding companies accountable. And within the supply chain, consumers are also voting with their purchasing power. So you have to pay attention.
Right. There's a lot more areas of accountability.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Let's pivot to the pandemic. You already talked about that. How did, under your leadership, how did your company pivot during the pandemic? What changes did you have to make?
I never knew ordering masks and sanitizer, you know, and trying to really do it ahead of everybody else was going to be a thing. But just picture this. Pandemic hits. I'm leading the consumer bank, 5,000 locations, 50,000 people. Corporate was able to go home. Moms, of color, young people, the folks that work in my branch. And had to work. They couldn't say, similar to our nurses and doctors and everyone else, and say, you know what? I know you want that cash, but I'm going home like you because I'm scared too.
Right.
That would cause a problem.
Yeah.
Let y'all not get your money. You know, y'all all good going home until that debit card not working. And everything's out of order. Y'all like shaking the ball or something, causing all kind of problems. Right? Small businesses, let them not get their PPP loan. So it was critical. We were essential.
Yeah.
So what did I learn? A lot. First, let me talk about the people, and then let me talk about technology and process. So what I learned is that as a leader, hands on a steering wheel, and you don't believe. I was in a zone. Literally, it was. I don't know when I slept. I don't know when I woke up. I was in a zone. No playbook.
Yeah.
Thought it would pass. Logistics. You open the branch, shut the branch. What if someone's coughing? What do you do? What happens if the masks don't come? There was short supply everywhere. What if you don't have the sanitizer? What if you don't have the spray? I mean, all of the logistics you could think of was happening. The supply chain, you don't realize how important it is because I never had to really think about it. It's even getting the cash, the Brinks workers, the security, the vault, all those different things. So you learn that as a leader in the crisis, you zone. One. Two, I learned you needed to be decisive and understand that it's not going to be. Give yourself and your team grace. Three, let go. I'm having my hands on the steering wheel. Got the kid on the left, the kids in the back. I can't look at them. I trust you. You got everything covered. You empower your team.
Yeah.
To acknowledge this is a team sport and we cannot be direct command all over. You need it to be empowered. 5,000 locations, 40,000 people, so many things going on. How do you trust your team? Last piece around the people side, to acknowledge as a leader, I don't have a. Remember, we were dealing with a pandemic and social justice. Not going on. But you get vulnerable. Many times leaders don't want to be vulnerable. I did a public piece on LinkedIn saying it's okay while you're here. Process. Even though this is something that has never happened, and even though there was not a playbook, as a CEO, you must be anticipatory. No good deed goes unpunished. Not when you have CFPB. While we were 2 hands on the steering wheel, there was no playbook. You bring your LODs, my lines of defense.
Yeah.
They were right there with me. Write down everything, think through everything. Any policy we change, flag it, notate it. Let me know, is there anything that will cause us to go to jail or do something illegal? Other than that, we have to be okay.
Yeah.
Because think about this. When you have 40, 50,000 people, I had to make a decision early on. that I could not have 5,000 branches open.
Mm.
I needed to take branches out of the system because I knew that everyone wasn't going to show up. And I had to do that in a bold way. Which branches? There's fair lending concern. There's rural America. There's access. So you needed to use your data and your analytics. You had to understand the 10-mile footprint, walk, drive, what does it look like? The platforms of your branches, some are open, some have metal detectors, which actually was a great thing with the metal, who knew, because you had the distance already. Those are like great branches at that time. But you literally had to document, why did you keep this branch on this side of town open and that branch closed? And was there anything that it could have had a disparate impact because of income, race, et cetera? So you had to think about all these things and document. So you needed to understand as a leader that even when you're in the middle of a crisis, you have to understand on the other end, everyone will tell you what you did wrong. So document everything. Document everything. And then technology. We were able to pivot like many companies because of the investments of technology. And kudos and shout out to all of the technologists that on the dime flat was able to shift policies that said you could only do things in the branch. You realize you could do on your laptop or iPad. You were able to rewrite your code in a way that was okay, do some quick testing and get going. The reason why we didn't totally shut down as a country was because of the power of technology. Power to allow things to keep going even though people were not in the office. So what I learned is that technology has unlocked things, and that even though it was a crisis, all of those lessons learned around the power of technology, the agility, things that would take 18 months was taking days. Bureaucracy at the finest was on display. Was like, oh, what could be possible? And so you learn so many things because you had to. And the trick, I think, going forward for all of us as leaders is realizing that you should not just think about this as your resiliency handbook. It should inspire us to lean forward in terms of the future of work. It should inspire us to lean forward around how you can empower your employees in ways that you didn't think you had. It allows you to understand the power of empathy, because you had, while we are still trying to figure out, do you come in, do you not, 40,000, 50,000 people. I'm talking about daycare needs. Professional people who are at home all day do not have the same daycare needs as RNs, as LVNs, as tellers. So we also need to be mindful of, all these essential workers that have navigated the pandemic, and really make sure that as we think about what we don't want to do and what we will do, millions of Americans was doing the things that were not. And so how do you take that mindset into a forward leaning about the two economies, the two types of folks, and how do you make sure you're bridging that? A lot of lessons, as you can imagine.
Lots of lessons. I can relate to that. March 6th, we were going to shut down the campus, and we had 5 days to move 400 courses online when we had limited experience, but we did it. Yeah. So just like your stories. So
one thing on this that I wanted to interject, because you just triggered this. Technology is a beautiful thing. And I think, when we all went to like Zoom life at first, those Zoom happy hours are so much fun. Now you're like, screw a Zoom happy hour. And so what it really, is it just me? Like at first it was like crazy hat day on Zoom. Yay. Now you're like, because what you realize is humanity.
It is.
We are meant as humans to interact with each other. I think that's the other reason why you see mental illness and health exploding, because of isolation. And then when we're starting to come back together, anxiety is real. So I think there's a lesson around the power of humanity, and that technology is amazing. But we as humans are not meant to only be on our computers 24/7. But I would also think that the beautiful thing about the pandemic, in terms of what it taught us, is it is a reset. It reminded me of the spin wheel I was on, what I was maybe missing and overlooking, and reconnecting in a really big way. And it's not just for women. 1.8 million women are out of the workforce because of COVID. There's a lot of talk about, how do we think about women, in the post-pandemic, and how do we think about, all the things. But I would also say that many men are going through the process too, because many men may have been working and kind of put that out, for their wife, for example. And by men being home, they realize they really do miss, being able to help their child with homework, or they really do miss, being home for meals. And so I think that when we talk about the return to office, there's also something that the men may not be as vocal, but the men are saying, I want some of this flexibility too. I want to know that it's okay to catch my son's game that I've been missing for years. But I think while there's a lot of things we have to understand about women and the burden that many women face with childcare, as many times many women are single women are the heads of their household. I do think there's another narrative to make sure that all employees are looking for this reset.
Right.
And I think we need to be mindful of that in totality while we understand some of the nuances with certain.
Interesting. In some strange ways, Zoom has humanized us
Yeah.
because we've gotten to get into people's homes and see their cats, dogs, and we've adapted that it's okay to have the cat hopping across the
Yes.
keyboard. Right?
Yes, we became less judgy.
Right, exactly, judgy. And maybe a little bit less conscious of
Less
ours.
conscious,
Right,
You're like, yeah, sorry, that's my daughter. Yeah, this is a big important meeting, but here she is.
There you go.
Whereas before you would have been like yelling, get
Yeah.
out. Here she is.
But interestingly, what we are seeing, and that's reflected in our students are so delighted to be back, that all the forums is standing room only, which validates our, like fundamentally we are social creatures and we thrive in company. But that leads me to the question before we pivot to the audience is, what's the new normal? As you return, what will you keep? What will you change? And what defines the new normal?
I think, for us as a leadership team, there's a lot to unpack. And so I think one of the things that we understand is, even as we return to office in January, it's going to be a test and learn year. I think it's understanding as leaders, we don't have all the answers, and that our company was not designed in a way that maybe employees may want today, even though the technology may be there. Now, if you were a company that was not where everyone was working from home, then you can't just assume that you're going to repeat, like I said, the happy hours because it worked in the office during happy hours. It's not going to work necessarily in a Zoom. And so one, I think the new normal is going to require us to test and learn. I think two, we're going to have to realize that people have been home and settled for like 2 years. So new habits have been formed. So to think that you can just say, come on back. And,
It'll be
that's
back.
a hot mess, and I would say wouldn't happen. So I think we are going to have real empathy and grace and really have this humanity embedded. I think the new normal is flexibility. I think people want and need the flexibility because they don't want to go fully back to how everything was working. Our part for companies, though, is how do you do flexibility in a way that is accretive on a sustained basis?
Right.
So meaning, if it's optional for people to come to work, what happens if you five came to the office? Everybody else did it. I'm gonna be like, I wasted my gas. On bottoms for what, right? I gotta have my Lululemon tights on or my Nike tights on. So that's not gonna feel great.
No.
And so, but you're flexible.
Yeah.
But the team won't feel great. And so I think if you're an analyst and you're in the investment banking, you learn from the other bankers. And so how are you going to learn? And so there's a lot of things to sort out. But I think as an executive, the first and foremost thing you have to think about on a return to office is clearly the safety. And clearly there's a lot of things going on right now to provide that clarity. Two, you do have to think about the needs of the organization and where are we as a company in order to deliver. But you also have to say it's our people. And so how do you really make sure that you can provide the flexibility, but yet learn how to create the culture that you've coveted for so long? in a way that it doesn't erode, because one of the learnings is that the reason why we were able to pivot was because relationships were already formed. So many of us have started new companies now on Zoom and haven't even met people. And so we were borrowing from the culture. I think that's something we have to realize. We were borrowing from the culture. So, and a crisis brings people together. We were all in the foxhole together. So now that things are settling, you're like, I've been here a year and I don't really know people. How do I navigate? People are going back to their norms, or we're all working from home. There's a lot to unpack. But what I do feel good about at TIAA is that we're going to test and learn. We as leaders are going to realize we're going to learn a ton. We're going to listen to our people, listen to the nuances, what they say, what they don't say. I also think the future of work is going to put a lot of responsibility on leadership engagement. You cannot be that leader who comes in your office and close your office and don't talk to your team and wonder why they don't want to come in. So I think that your culture is an emotion and a feeling. And I think the future of work is going to have to be experiential, just like the client experience. Right? If you think about technology and all the things that have changed, it's the experience, right? That client obsession. And I think what's happening now is that we as leaders are going to have to realize employees want a real experience when they come in. Otherwise, tell me again, why am I spending $400 or $500 for gas a month? Right. So that's a different kind of muscle in leaders, which is why I love what you all are learning here with Dean Samba. He was sharing with me some of the great things you all are learning around diversity, equity, and inclusion, and how they're talking about culture, because as leaders, how you make people feel. Are you walking the hall? Right. Do you, engage? Do you have coffee with folks so that people will say, I love when I come to the office because I get a different experience than when I am at home? That's another experience. They both can coexist. So I do believe that you will see people working outside of the office as a new normal, which is fine and great. But I do think you can't assume that life will be the same when you come in as a leader. I think you're going to have to really be experiential to make sure employees see the value when they come into the office, not because you just said Tuesday is the work day. Right.
So many new lessons. I like the expression test and learn, because that's what we have to do. I'm sure that your experiences and ideas have stimulated a lot of questions. So I'm going to open it up. And there is a microphone on each side. So please step up and identify yourself, and questions for Thasunda. Oh.
This is very formal.
Go ahead.
Hi, my name is Quinn. I'm currently an MBA student for Market Analytics and Research at Nielsen Center. So my question is that early on in your conversation, you mentioned about bringing your perspective. I think you're referring to what your identity is, who you are, to the workplace, so you can distinguish yourself from other people who might have similar technical abilities. So my question is how do you specifically do that? Maybe in the interview or later on, if you get hired, how do you continue bringing your perspective?
Absolutely. It's such a great question. And I'll give you two just real examples. You know how we say data, like Throwback Thursday, we would say, well, the technology is not biased. Remember that?
Yep.
But who's coding the technology?
People.
People. And if you would Google what is beauty, you would see blonde, blue eyes, which is super beautiful, by the way. But so is brown hair and brown eyes and red hair and everything else, freckles, and so there's bias. And so if we don't have perspective, carry a blind spot in feeding a narrative that says there's no bias in technology. So when you have your perspective, I guarantee you that the conversations that were happening, companies with engineers, I promise you, there was someone else who did not look like or act like that said, I think there's bias in this, because when I look at these algorithms and I see the output, there has to be bias in it. So if you were not bringing your perspective or your voice, you would not be helping your company in the long run, because it would be ripe with bias. You'd be out there telling a story how your technology is not biased. So buy all this software, buy this or buy that, and you're going down a path that would be, I think, disastrous. Secondly, let me give you an example about, however, it's not just, it's your identity is your experience. It's how you experience the world. That's what I'm talking about and bringing your perspective. And let me give you a real example at my former company. So, as you think, he told me he's working at JP Morgan Chase in Columbus, so he wanted to know all the tea. He wanted all the tea. So I was like, okay. But let me give you a real example. How many of you all, when you think about Silicon Valley, right? Super dope engineers. How many of you see blue jeans, sweatshirts, hoodies, right? That's what the image is, right?
Yes.
Right? That you are repping hoodie, you're an engineer, you rep, right? Now here's are you a technologist? There it is. I'm good, right? But here is the point. Here's where identity matters. We were having a conversation in a senior exec. Like, I want to be more like, Silicon Valley because you're at JP Morgan Chase. You have all these technologies. We're a technology company. We want to attract the best technologists. I think, we should wear hoodies and this, and they're going on and on and on. And I was like, I said, we should be careful with how we talk about it, because if our African-American men walked in and had hoodies and sweats or jeans, y'all would think Black Lives Matter entered the building. Y'all would not think technology. You wouldn't think Silicon Valley.
Sure.
So imagine the blind spot.
Yes.
We're out there saying, we want you to wear hoodies and jeans. And really just basically saying, we want the folks in Silicon Valley to see this company, this financial services company, as amazing. That was the intent. But without having a perspective, I would have had another senior exec carry a blind spot that would have caused us a lot of problems, even though the spirit was right. But being a Black woman, knowing what it feels like to have a son, and if he had to wear a hoodie and jeans and what people will look like, even though he's in Greenwich, Connecticut, you're going to bring that narrative to the conversation. If you understand that your perspective is valued, that perspective is needed. And it's not to say that we shouldn't have a culture that people can wear hoodies and sweatshirts and jeans. It's just understanding what a bunch of Black guys, would you be comfortable the minute I said, well, maybe me, but would you be comfortable? I mean, keep it real.
Right.
Would you all of a sudden go, oh, I'm so glad this policy, let me go in with my hoodie and my jeans. You wouldn't do it.
No.
And everybody else would go, what's the problem? You're always wearing your suit and tie. Am I right? That's why you need to bring your perspective to corporate America. That answer your question?
Yeah, thank you.
And what's fascinating about that is what I hear you say is like a duality, perspective and context, and you're continually managing the tension.
Which
right?
is why you want
Right.
people from all different walks of life. You want people from all different backgrounds. You want the people from rural America, because when we were talking about branches and you think about it as if it's an urban market until you talk to people in rural America, you get a different perspective, which makes you smarter as a leader, because you're willing to listen to what is not given or what's not in the.
Wonderful. So we have another question on that side. Yes, please go ahead.
Hi, thank you so much for joining us today and for sharing your experiences. I'm Karan, second year MBA student. So my question is, I'm assuming that you have great sponsors and mentors in your life to grow in your career. So my question is like, how do you identify a good mentor and good sponsor for your career? And as a young professional, as a young MBA graduate, how do you do that?
Like young.
The team is young. At least it's not younger.
I know, not younger self. I like that. Here's some tips. Can I drop a few more gems?
Sure.
Okay. Your mentors are all around you.
There you go.
Right? I told the other group, you rent your title, you own your character. Titles are rented. You should look at your mentorship all around you, which means there are people above you and below you to the side of you. One of my mentors is my executive assistant. The way she's so selfless, the way she represents me on how she deals with folks, because she understands that she is an extension, it's so inspiring. And it teaches me that level of selflessness. which is mentorship is also people that are dead and alive. Maya Angelou is an amazing mentor of mine. I can read her books. I love Condoleezza Rice and her books. You know, like there's so many people that have had extraordinary perspectives. Is at your fingertip. But sometimes we say, I don't have a mentor. Yes, you do. Read a book. A lot of mentors. So I just think that's important because sometimes, you know, especially when you grow up the way I may have grown up, and if I was thinking about the mentors, I don't know anyone that was in corporate America. I don't know anyone that has an MBA, but that shouldn't stifle my ability to get the tools that I need. So mentors are to the left, to the right, up and down. Do not be uppity on your mentorship. And then realize that you can also read books and get some amazing, amazing mentors through so many amazing people that have served our country, that have been presidents, et cetera. In terms of advocacy and sponsorship, it starts with your brand. Know your brand. Your brand needs to be consistent. You cannot act one way when Dean Samba is here, and then another way the minute he walks out the room, where people will say, oh yeah, she manages up really.
Right.
Oops.
Yes.
Right? Your brand needs to be consistent because, by the way, it's the people that got me here.
Yeah.
Just saying. You have to, and the reason why I say you have to know your brand and you have to be consistent, because sponsorship and advocacy means I am willing to give some of my credibility for you. I am willing to give my assets for you. So the best way is you have to compel me. There has to be something about you that will compel me to use my voice on your behalf when you're not in the room. So if you want advocacy and sponsorship, what are you doing that would compel someone to want to advocate on your behalf? And that may mean, for example, your consistency. You know what? I see Dean Samba, he's here early than anyone. He always, you know, goes that extra mile. He gives me a perspective. He wrote something up. He writes a brief after every meeting that just gives some insights and thoughts on what he heard. Like, you know, then a job comes up for Dean Samba and someone go, well, you know, he's only been here for 2 years. I think, you know, maybe he needs more time. And then someone will go, wait, whoa. Samba's here every morning at 5:30, working, not just trying to wait till people see him and then leave. You know? Don't do that. He's here at 5:30 working. He leaves, you know, late because he's working. He goes the extra mile. He knows he has strong interpersonal relationships, the quality of his work. He asks great questions. Give him a shot. I am willing to use some of my credibility because he's consistent. It's a safe bet. So I just think sponsorship and advocacy has to be something that you have to give someone a reason. You can't just show up and go, can you be my advocate? I don't know you like that.
Right.
So you do have to think about your brand. You have to think about what are you doing to differentiate yourself and how are you compelling someone? Just like referrals. You go to a store, they did what it did. Do what it do, got you what you needed. You're not gonna call your friend, oh my God, they rung me up okay. You know what I mean? But if you have an experience like Nordstrom's back in the day, right? The piano was going, they walked out, handed me a bag. You go, oh my gosh, I only go to Nordstrom's. Do you see the way they treat me? The return policy is everything. I'm compelling you to talk about it. So if you want sponsorship, if you want, you know, someone to advocate, make sure you're checking yourself to know what is your brand, how do you do it consistently, and how are you compelling someone to advocate on your behalf, which means, by the way, don't always have your head down.
Yeah.
Don't always have your head down. You need to look up. You need to make sure that sometimes you have to be your own marketer. And not wait for someone to tell your story if no one is telling your story.
I love it because one of the lessons you have to learn is what's the fine line between humility and advocacy for yourself, right? Sometimes we are sometimes taught, be humble, but don't be so humble that the world doesn't know who you are. So that's an interesting analogy.
And the way you do it, I like to role play because, you know, like, okay, what does that mean? How do I not just go, hey, I woke up like this? Okay, how do you model that?
Yes.
So the way you would model it, what's your name again? Avi. Yes, Avi. If no one is like, oh my God, Avi, your work is amazing, blah, 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 and you're sitting here like, no one's saying this. here's what you could do. You could say, but Dean Samba, if you have a moment, you know, last time we were in class and you said something very insightful about X, Y, and Z. And so I did some additional research.
Yes.
And so I wanted to share with you, based on your inspiration, you know, it compelled me to do more. And what I thought I would do was to put together this package that I'll just leave with you so that you can see an alternative view in the way in which you inspired me. Did I talk about how dope I was?
Yeah.
No. But
No.
was I dope? Yes. Because here's the point. Everybody, you bring the person into the conversation to have a reason to be your advocate. Because I told Dean Samba he was pretty amazing, that he is, I mean, it wasn't even cheese, like just, you know, just like you said something that inspired me, that caused me to do something. Don't just tell people they're amazing.
Right.
It inspired me to do something. So then I went and I did the extra work. I was listening. I was curious. I put it together.
Right.
I gave you something that I think could be accretive to help you. You're welcome. Right? Do you
Yeah.
see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Did that seem arrogant? Did that seem, but what I did was I said, you know what? My manager wasn't doing it for me. I'm doing all this amazing work. How can I do this? And that's why when you come early or you stay late, you find that 5-minute piece and you just are just like, here was something that you said, here's the quality of my work. Just thought it would be helpful as you think about X, Y, and Z. I gave value to Dean Sam. That makes sense to you all?
So Avi, I'm looking for that memo on Monday morning.
She'll have it Sunday night.
Nice example. Please go ahead.
Hi, my name is Amelie. I'm a second-year marketing analytics and insights student. Thank you so much for your time tonight. You talked a little about empowering your employees during the crisis. I wanted to ask you, what's your strategy to doing that without sort of just sending them off? You know, how do you make them feel like they have the resources and really are empowered, and balance that with giving them their own time and their own ownership of whatever they're doing?
No, it's such a great question. You know, first of all, trust is earned. And I think as a leader, you have to realize my job is to make sure that my team feels like that they can feel empowered. And so you have to model the behavior you aspire. So as a leader, I think it's important for me not to say, be empowered and go. But it's for me to then say, you know, what's your name, sir? Paul? So for me, it would be, you know, Paul, you know, how are you thinking about X, Y, and Z? You know, if you don't have a thought right now, that's okay. But if you can go back and we can follow this up in 2 weeks, I want to hear your perspective. And so I'm basically saying, what do you think? Sending grace, because he's probably looking at me crazy. Like, it's okay if you don't know, I'll give you 2 weeks, but let me tell you what I'm solving for. And so my point is, you have to give people a little bit of real courage, and you have to make sure that what I want is your thinking. Then I think in terms of how do you make sure that they're equipped, you know, what you want to make sure is that, so Paul, you lead X, Y, and Z. Tell me what you know about this client. And if I think you're not on the right track, I'll say, you know, well, let me tell you what I'm looking for and why. Leadership, the art of leadership is explaining the why. Right? And so I'm saying, here's why I'm really pushing you on this. It's because of this, 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 and this. So I want you to go back, really think about it, and come back to me on how can we solve this. So you have to provide clarity of the mission, because everyone can't just fill it in. Clarity of the mission. Here's how I'm thinking about it. Here is the problem I'm trying to solve. I know you have a great background in this, and I want to understand your perspective. And by the way, the other piece in order to unlock empowerment is you have to have grace. You have to make sure that people understand that there are things called 2-door and 1-door decisions. 1-door decision, I'm probably not just going to tell you to go and, you know, because that's a major decision. We're going to have real process, et cetera. 2-door means it's okay if you fail. There's, you know, it's not the end of the world. I think you have to create a culture where people can feel like it's okay if I get it wrong, and that you as a leader have to be clear, this is a 2-door decision. You know, I really want to know what you think, and I want you to try. So that's how you do it. And you have to know your team. Some people can just fill in the blank. Some people paint by numbers. So you have to really understand, who do you have on your team and how do you unlock their potential? And you, just like a teacher, I think it's incumbent of the teacher to be able to figure out how do I unlock your learning. Not always about everyone else trying to adapt to me. And I think that's another secret in leadership. I work for the people. So if I work for you, then I need to make sure that I am unlocking your full potential. If you really understand, what I'm trying to do. I need to share with you in order for you to do that.
That's wonderful. I know that we have a lot of questions. This might probably be the last one, but go ahead.
Okay, I'm glad for that. And thank you very much. And I think I learned a lot from you, but I want to ask like something different. Like you just talked about you're managing like 50,000 people and they're different departments, so many questions. And you talked about brain gymnasts. And I just took 17 credits this semester. And I think my brain has left the gym. So I just want to ask you like how you cope up with so many different problems and this stress comes with that. Like how is there a routine, what like outside work that you do that keeps your brain so clear so that you can take decisions so effectively and strongly?
That's such a great question. So it's kind of like that work-life balance thing or something. Is that kind of what you're asking? How do you?
Yeah, like what outside work that outside work which like clears your mind or you get that, okay, this is my routine, I'm in the mood,
Yeah.
let's go and work now.
Totally, no. So I'm going to combine this thing. There's no such thing as work-life balance, it's a lie. So let me just put that. Right? Because balance means things reconcile. I
Yeah.
don't know how things reconcile if I'm spending 15 hours at work and I have 4 kids and a husband and a daughter, a wife, a sister. It does not balance. And I would say the S on the chest is in Superwoman, it spins. So I had to throw away work-life balance. So I do not do work-life balance anymore. What I do, because we are in finance and an MBA, I live my life like a diversified portfolio. And I'm going to tell you how it connects to the spirit of your question. Here is the point, and I'm so glad you asked it because I do think y'all need to hear this because y'all are amazing. Live your life like a diversified portfolio. The reality is there's only 100% of you, not 110, not 150%. Write down everything that matters to you. I'm a daughter, wife, philanthropist, friend, sister, me time, etc., and allocate. You can only get to 100. Based on the market condition, you allocate your portfolio accordingly. So I'm a new CEO. I have to allocate more to being an executive because I am learning every day because I am the least smart person in the room at any given meeting at work. So there's a higher allocation. Here is the point. If you put down everything that matters to you in your portfolio, you start to live more intentionally on the things that matter. A portfolio gives you grace, unlike trying to do a balance, because you are responding to life conditions. Sometimes you have to short the stock. I'll let that matter. But here's the deal. Because everything that matters to me is in my portfolio, here's what I know to be true. I am real and honest about the fact that my children do not get 100%. Age from 5 to 20. Best allocation is probably 30%. I'm here for 15 hours. I'm not, mommy. I mean, 10, 12 hours at work. So here's the deal. Because I understand that, when I have that allocation with my child, you get 100% of that allocation. Because I haven't fooled myself into thinking there's 150% of me. So I operate with intentionality because I'm like, I only have this percent of the portfolio. It also gives me permission to reallocate, which makes me feel like based on the market condition, my dad was diagnosed with cancer, I had to allocate more time to being a daughter. But because everything was in my portfolio, I still made sure it was 1% allocation on something else or 10. Here's the point. You live your life like a diversified portfolio and everything that matters to you is in it, then you will have joy. You will have utter joy. Right. Because what I realized is that on any given day, I am not a great mommy. But over time, like a diversified portfolio, I am a really good mom. Some days I am not the best executive, but over time, I'm a really good executive. Right? So if you live your life like a diversified portfolio, you will respond to market conditions, you will reallocate, but it will also, as the market changes, you will rebalance. Over time, you will outperform this thing called life. So what do I do when I'm stressed out? I activate another aspect of my portfolio, like being a mommy and watching Boss Baby or playing cards and dominoes with my husband every night to take my mind off work, or a glass of wine and cheese.
There you go.
But that's the point. Live your life like a diversified portfolio. Over time, you'll outperform this thing called life. And when you think about all the things that you're dealing with, you're just responding to market conditions. When that condition settles, you give yourself permission to recalibrate and you will have utter joy because everything that matters to you is in your.
That's wonderful. Thasunda, this is a fascinating conversation and we could probably talk for 1 more hour, but it's always good to leave people on a high and wanting for more.
Well, I do want to commend you, and I want to commend you on this roadmap of 2025 and the strategy and the way that you are forward leaning this program, because what University of Wisconsin, what this MBA program is doing for you all, it's leading with what the future is, which is today. And so the kinds of things that you are talking about and you shared with me is exactly what the workforce it needs today. So you should feel really good that the quality of the education that you are receiving is relevant and it's timely and it's now. So make sure you absorb all of it, all of it, all of it. And then let me just close by expressing my gratitude. Thank you for taking the time to listen. Thank you for pursuing an advanced degree. I think it's absolutely amazing. I know it's not easy, no matter if you're a traditional student or non-traditional student. You are here and you're doing amazing things. And I wish you so much success. Technology is the business. Business is technology. Analytics matter. You want the road to be a CEO, think about how you start. Make sure you're intentional, take your shot. Take your shot, take your shot. And I look forward to seeing that maybe the next future CEO of TIAA is in this room.
Very good.
Best of luck.
Well, thank you very much. I'm Jean Sink along with Blair and Gabe. Thasunda, thank you so much for all you've shared tonight. Dean Samba, thank you for taking us along in this conversation as well. We'd like to invite all of you to continue the conversation, networking, grab a bite to eat or a drink out in the East Atrium for the reception that is sponsored by the M. Keith Weikel Fund. So thank you once again.
Thank you.